Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we explore the very layered and complex but very rich domain of psychedelic medicine. As you may all know, I'm in Washington, D.C. As it turned out yesterday, I was walking by the Capitol building, actually was between the Capitol building and the Supreme Court, when they were voting to oust Leo McCarthy as the Speaker of the House. It was the first time in U.S. history, going back nearly 250 years, that a Speaker of the House has been ousted. And so his tenure marks the shortest tenure of any Speaker of the House and the first one to be ousted by members of his own party. And we all have had our points of view on that. But as I was walking by, I had the passing thought, I bet if we all gave the members of Congress, all 435 of them, a tab of acid, I bet they would wake up to a larger reality and begin to view the world, themselves, their priorities in a completely different way. And then the thought passed and I carried on to the metro, where I caught the subway to where I'm staying here on DuPont Circle. But I want to frame this idle thought in a serious way along the following lines. It's worth noting that it was in December of 1942 that U.S. scientists, under the leadership of Robert Oppenheimer, split the atom, which gave rise in July 16th, 1945, in New Mexico, the Trinity test, which ignited the first atomic explosion that led, as we all know, to dropping the atom bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki on August 6th and August 9th, only 3 weeks later. It was in Switzerland in March of 1943 that Albert Hofmann experimented with his first tab of acid. He took LSD. And I've always been struck at both the contradiction and the synchronicity between humanity splitting the atom to build weapons of mass destruction and Albert Hofmann, almost at the same time, ingesting LSD that opened his world, opened his mind, opened his soul to a completely new cosmic reality. And since then, those two phenomena have coexisted side by side among many other factors in our world. And those who have ingested psychedelics, like Albert Hofmann, have experienced an illumination of being that almost universally enables them to see that the way human beings are currently treating each other in such a highly destructive way and treating the earth in a way that is cataclysmic is an exercise in futility and only inviting our self-destruction. I remember a conversation that I had with Stan Grof, Dr. Stan Grof, the great psychiatrist and researcher, really the successor of Freud and then Jung, as a pioneer of the human psyche. Also, one of the earliest researchers back in the Czech Republic and then at Johns Hopkins and other places on LSD until it was made illegal. And then he went out to Esalen Institute in California, where he developed the holotropic breath work, which he discovered could induce naturally, just through breathing, many of the same experiences and effects as taking psychedelics. But I first met Stan back in the mid-1980s at Esalen while he was still very enthusiastically developing the holotropic breath work. And we were talking about the problems that were besetting the world and the Cold War and so forth. And I asked him, Stan, if you had to suggest one solution to the world's problematique, what would it be? And without pausing, he said, I would give everybody on earth psychedelics because it's the fastest and most incontrovertible way to wake people up. And that's what we need. And I've never forgotten that. And so as we stand on the threshold, as we all know, along with a million other species around planet Earth on the verge of self-destruction, as climate change literally spins out of control. And as the Secretary General Giguere said 2 weeks ago at the General Assembly in New York, that humanity now has opened the gates of hell. It's synchronistically important, I think, to also observe that after the initial inspiration and enthusiasm of psychedelics, quickly repressed by the governments and made illegal, they are now at this critical moment experiencing a resurgence, and a resurgence that is enabling the public through legislation to begin the process of legalization. And I just, as we explore now the potential for psychedelic medicine, I just want us all to hold, again, that juxtaposition back in the early 1940s between splitting the atom and developing the weapons of mass destruction, and splitting the psyche through psychedelics, and unfolding the possibilities of extraordinary cosmic illumination, and how that has been forming a double helix in the human psyche. And now at our critical hour, psychedelics are unfolding to the public in unprecedented ways. So it's within that context that I want to welcome our two speakers today, the co-founders and directors of the Synaptic Institute, Matthew Hicks and Olivia Giguere, who have a partnership with Ubiquity University. Synaptic Institute provides trainings in the therapeutic use of psychedelics, and Ubiquity University grants graduates of the Synaptic Institute with the possibility of getting master's and PhD degrees in psychedelic medicine studies. And I just want to say, before they come on, that they're in a very unique and precious period of their lives. They joined us in July down in the south of France in the Dordogne for our shamanic journey to those ancient Paleolithic caves, and they came in radiant with love because they had just become engaged, and they were like a perfume to our whole group as we went down into the caves and spent time in ceremony and in community, but just to witness the freshness of love was a truly beautiful thing. So Matthew and Olivia, with a very warm heart, I want to welcome you to Humanity Rising. And they're going to tell us all a little bit about their backgrounds and their mission there at Synaptic Institute. And then I'll circle back for a conversation. But welcome.
Thank you, Jim. So I thought we would maybe just start by telling a little bit of our kind of personal stories on how we came to doing the work that we're doing, and talk a little bit about Synaptic Institute's particular mission, and then broaden out into kind of the wider conversation of how psychedelics or entheogens might play a role in really changing global culture, really. Certainly the Western culture needs, changing a whole lot. But for me, I grew up as a conservative Christian in the Midwest. It's just how I was raised, and was convinced of that for quite a while. And it wasn't until, I was in my early 30s, really, in medical school, finished kind of midway through medical school, that another naturopathic doctor presented on the sort of medical science of how psychedelics could be a powerful tool in treating mental health conditions. And that, it was probably in 2015 or so, and that just blew my mind. Because I just had grown up in the indoctrinated belief that drugs are bad, just say no, right? I was sort of one of the Nancy Reagan kids, growing up. And at that point in my life, I had already kind of left Christianity and I was sort of really a hardcore. I don't want to say hardcore, but I was a pretty convinced atheist for a period in my life, and found the value in meditation, really kind of looking to the research and seeing that there was benefits in meditation. And eventually, being exposed to a lot of meditation, I kind of softened up to Buddhism a little bit. And eventually, as my interest, became really in psychedelics as a sort of niche, I wanted to get into professionally as a naturopathic doctor. I also simultaneously worked on a master's degree in integrative medical research, and completed both of those. So I definitely wanted to do more research in this really burgeoning field. And so I went full steam ahead with that, and ultimately took the California Institute of Integral Studies certificate in psychedelic assisted therapy and research, and completed that in 2020. And really, felt called to do something more. Also around that time, by the time I was kind of coming out of med school and early in my career and doing a residency, the movement to create a legal pathway in Oregon was collecting signatures for a ballot measure, and we're both located in Portland, Oregon. And so I kind of joined the campaign, was giving public talks about that, and saw really that there was an opportunity to do for training. There's a deep need for training in doing this type of work. And at the time, there was really the CIIS program that I had completed, and then there was the MAPS training for MDMA, which I also completed. But that was it, and there was sort of this big hole. And that's not the case anymore. There's tons of training programs now. But at the time, it seemed like that felt like a really strong calling to me. And so, anyway, longer story shorter, I decided to form Synaptic Institute. And, I really felt it was important to avoid some of the trappings of the capitalist culture that we live in, and there's a lot of opportunists kind of catching the movements that's happening in the psychedelic space, with I'll say mixed intentions. I think even the business-minded folks are attracted to it in part, at least in part, because they see its potential to really help people, and that's a good intention. But it comes so mixed because we're so wired into a capitalist system that it's also very opportunistic. And and then people become not people needing help or relief from suffering, but sales opportunities to do things. And I wanted to really curtail that impulse. And so we decided to do this as a nonprofit organization, so that we don't have ownership. This exists for the mission of doing this work. And so and around the time, by the time we were launching the actual program is when Olivia came and joined as kind of co-director of the program. And I'll stop talking in just a second. She can tell her story a little bit. But before I do that, I'll just say one. I'll just give you our mission and vision statement that we have. And this is for the training program. We're also a nonprofit clinic as well, where we offer integrative mental health care, doing ketamine assisted psychotherapy, as well as naturopathic integrative sort of services as well. But our mission for the training program is this: we envision a world with a widespread network of highly skilled practitioners providing care and connection to self, others, and the world at large. Our mission is to cultivate skillful, ethical, and socially responsible practitioners of entheogenic medicine, rooted in holism, traditional wisdom, and science. And I could say more about that, but maybe I'll just pause. And Olivia, if you want to tell your story and go into maybe even why we chose the word entheogenic, or I can come back in and say a few more things about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to take some time to share about how I got here. So in contrast to Matthew's more conservative upbringing, and then this really exponential and meteoric expansion into the psychedelic and entheogenic realm, I grew up very differently. I would say that, I had the privilege of being born into a home where I was not indoctrinated early, and would say that I was, in some ways born a psychonaut, and became interested in consciousness very early on. I like to tell the story about how when I was 8 years old, in the same year, I saw The Matrix, The Truman Show, and 2001: A Space Odyssey. And those movies were incredibly eye-opening and were profound experiences for me to have at that young age. And from that point on, I've been deeply interested in consciousness and what it means to be alive. What is actually going on here that we are not seeing? I definitely believe that we're only getting a small trickle of information through our, 5 or 6 or 8 senses, however many you want to say. And there's a lot more going on beyond that. So throughout high school, I continued this exploration of consciousness and started learning from the different wisdom traditions of the world, everything from Buddhism to paganism, and was also an avid student of science at that point in time, which has only continued throughout my life. And I was also introduced to psychedelics at that time. And when I had that experience, it was oh, okay, wonderful. This is a tool that I can use to explore all of the questions that I've been asking up until this point. And there are other people who are doing that as well. And that journey continued through my 20s. And it was in my late 20s when I was in medical school that I finally came to entheogenic or psychedelic ceremony. Up until that point, my use of these substances was much more recreational. Although it was very intentional, it was still recreational. Only having the guidance of my peers who had come before me. And then that experience shifted where I got to sit with masters who had spent decades cultivating their relationship with these plants and learning from long, deep lineages of their own teachers, most of whom were from South America and Central America. And that profoundly shifted what I believed or what I saw, could be accessed through these medicines. However, in being introduced to this world for so many decades prior to coming into this work, I came to it when it was very much underground. This was not something that you often shared with other people out of your just immediate circle. These things were illegal. There were so many different, petitions happening all up and down the West Coast to have these substances be decriminalized or legalized for therapy, but I didn't know what that would look like or when that would happen. In some ways, it seemed like a pipe dream that the establishment was far too established to ever let the general population have access to these medicines again. And then it was in, about the middle of my time in naturopathic medicine school. Matthew had graduated a few years prior to me. And I saw that he was a naturopathic doctor in the community who was openly speaking about the use of ketamine for psychedelic purposes and healing within the psychedelic space. And I instantly honed in on that. It was like seeing a light at the end of the tunnel, somebody finally holding up a torch in this dark space that I knew I wanted to be in, but needed more, exposure and help to, bring this to the surface. And so I contacted Matthew really quickly after that and just continued to stay in touch and ended up, learning underneath him for several months and then becoming colleagues. And then very quickly, life opened up and opportunity opened up, and we came into partnership in both life and this business. And this pursuit of healing and truth and exploration. And I think that just really speaks to the beauty of, what can happen when you do, tune in and drop out and just let the flow of life take you and open to it and, engage in both the celebration and healing that can come with this work. And we've turned it into our life's work. And I'll let you talk, Matthew, about more of why we use the term entheogen. So it is really foundational to this.
Yeah, so it's it's for those who perhaps don't know that the term entheogen. The term psychedelic would probably all know means mind manifesting or spirit manifesting. Developed by Humphrey Osmond and
Aldous Huxley.
Aldous Huxley, thank you. And a little bit of the history there is that you had the psychedelic 60s unfold, and which was a very mixed bag of some responsible use and lots of therapy and research, but it also got a little wild. And there were some legitimately not so positive things that came out of that movement, and regardless, that word got a little bit stigmatized because of some of those negative stories, negative press for it. And so it was Carl Ruck from Harvard who proposed this term entheogen to really kind of re-hone the intention of using mind-altering plants as cultivating the divinity within, which is what the term entheogen means generating the divine from within oneself. And so it's not necessarily the case that it's entheogen means something special that's separate from psychedelics. It's really about distinguishes the intention of the use. So you could be talking about the same substance, psilocybin mushrooms, and you could, it's everyone agrees that's a psychedelic, right? But it depending on how you use it, it could be an entheogen if you're doing it perhaps in ceremony with an intention to do some, exploration or therapy or whatever. But taking it at a concert just to have a good time, not necessarily entheogenic, but still psychedelic. So anyway, that's a bit of the origin of that term entheogen, and we chose to use it for our programs, which we just call entheogenic medicine training programs, because we see, I guess we hold the opinion, I'll put it that way, we hold the opinion that part of what is sort of ailing the world is a lack of connection to spirit. And that can get controversial in various contexts and what that means. But we think what the healing potential, and a lot of the research coming out of psychedelic therapy, which is very clinical in many cases, where we're talking about the effects on the brain and using very sometimes conventional psychotherapy methods. But the research has shown over and over again that the strength of the mystical experience in these clinical trials really correlates strongly with the benefit that people are having. So people are having these very existential realizations in these, even atheists. And there's a famous, Johns Hopkins person, or a famous case that often gets quoted of this woman saying, "I'm a profound, still committed atheist, but I met God and it changed, I felt God's love," essentially was how she described her experience. And she was profoundly changed by that. And so our use of this term entheogen is to really acknowledge that psychedelic therapy, it's spiritual medicine. And I think regardless of what worldview you believe, whether you're a Buddhist or a shamanic practitioner or even a Christian or whatever, the real work that's going on here is spiritual. As sometimes we can be very delicate around spiritual topics because we don't want to offend anybody, but we kind of just embraced it and said this is spiritual medicine. And the way we approach it in our program is not to indoctrinate anybody in a worldview, but to introduce some of these transpersonal concepts. And so we include a Rastafarian from Jamaica who gives us a bit of his worldview and tradition. We include shamanic practitioners from Mexico and Ecuador presenting their worldviews. We do 6 weeks on Buddhism as a way to frame these sort of mind-expanding experiences into a framework where they can be grounded and integrated. And that would be, I think, one of the biggest criticisms that we could look back on the psychedelic 60s and 70s, where things went a little bit awry, is that these experiences were introduced into a culture that did not know how to integrate them. There wasn't a lineage of mentorship and wisdom to ground those experiences. And so the opportunity now with more experience, because the 60s happened and we made some mistakes and misdirections, we can look at least historically, but also through careful research and controlled clinical trials and different kind of responsible ways of exploring these things, we can I think really make bigger strides in using these resources to really change a culture and to change a lot of individual lives and expand out from there and really raise the collective consciousness of our communities and our world. And so that's our perspective and why we choose to do things the way we do. You know, not everyone agrees with us in these things. I still encounter a lot of professionals, even in the psychedelic therapy space, that are very, still committed to atheism. And there's people who believe that even the psychotherapy is a little too, is unnecessary, and the drugs alone are, probably do most of the work. And we take the experiences that people have on them and we just call them fictions, and they're useful fictions. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's the case. But I think there's a little bit more to it. And so anyway, that's where we're coming from. And one other thing, I'll mention just about, my background, my bios and things I missed in saying is that, I also served in the Army for 6 years in the National Guard, and was very, very fortunate to never be in combat. My only deployment was to Kosovo, which was a peacekeeping mission. So I consider myself very, very lucky. And I think, I feel really called to help veterans have had difficulty in serving that community, partly because I'm a naturopath and the VA doesn't recognize naturopaths, and we can't get covered by veterans healthcare organizations, so that's been a struggle. But that's a population that has the potential to really benefit from this type of medicine and changing a worldview, which like me as a 19-year-old raised conservative, thought that signing up to defend my country with, it was good intentions, but I was literally willing to kill people for what I thought was a good cause. And to go from that, and for many veterans, it's, a traumatizing experience. I think worse than dying is having to, kill another human being. And that is where, to really get into the work of working with veterans in these psychedelic states, that's the thing that gets flipped. Is the absurdity of war and the opportunity to really find one's purpose in that, which is we're here to heal, not to kill. And so anyway, I just wanted to give a little bit of voice to that. And then also briefly just to say a couple things about shamanism, because that's how we connected, sort of how we connected with Ubiquity, was going to this class in southern France and seeing some of the Ice Age caves through a shamanic perspective. And I just recently accepted a research fellowship with Oregon Health Science University, where I'm going to be doing some psychedelic research. And I've also connected with the researcher at another institution that I'm going to publish some papers with on shamanic practices, which is really lacking in clinical trial research. So we're moving in the direction of doing that. One of my great interests is really reintegrating shamanic practices with psychedelic therapy, because they've been divorced for a long time. Really, when the war on drugs began in the early 70s, shamanic practitioners in the West, which was really just kind of a new phenomenon at that time. There wasn't a lot of people doing shamanic work in the West then, but they had to come up with ways to do it without drugs, right? And so they, people like Michael Harner and Sandra Ingerman and others developed what they call core shamanism, which is sort of the average shamanic practices around the world. And anyway, there's more to be said about that, but I recently got a question from one of our own students in our program, a student who's a psychotherapist, who's an atheist, and asked this question, like, what does shamanism have to do with psychedelics? And I was flabbergasted by the question. I'm like, what do you mean? Like the two are so interconnected, like historically. I mean, they're a part of really human heritage. People have always been ingesting psychotropic plants in every culture, in every place that a psychotropic plant grows or fungus. People have been using them. Not just people, but animals too ingest these things. And the practices of expanding the mind into altered states or expanded states is ubiquitous. And it's only in the last few decades that we've divorced these practices. And I think it's time and it's useful to reintegrate them. And we in the West just haven't been doing that, partly because of the long hegemony of Christianity, where in Christianity we've separated science from religion, and we don't want to offend people, so it's just we keep the domains completely separate, and we don't want to step on anyone's toes, and that has resulted in this sort of keeping just shamanic practice or anything spiritual outside of the professional realm, right? Anyone who's a therapist or a doctor or whatever, they're expected to be kind of agnostic and neutral in all these things, and even in the holistic medicine world, right? Olivia and I are naturopathic doctors. We hear this all the time, this sort of nod to mind, body, spirit, and the mind and body part we do pretty well, but the spirit part nobody really knows, like, what does that mean? It's like, okay, so you pray, great, it's like, but you go do that somewhere else, and it would seem almost unprofessional in the current status quo to suggest that you should do communicate with a spirit guide, or to suggest that you should go into a trance and practice some of these things. And so I think there's a lot of ignorance of the techniques of these things among professionals, and so we acknowledge it, but we send people elsewhere. And I think it's time that we kind of reintegrate these things and include them in training programs for professionals doing this type of work. And so that's what we feel called to do, and what we're actively doing, and doing it in a respectful way. And I think another sort of uniquely American issue with this is the issue of appropriation, right? Which partly comes from we're a colony, right, of Europeans who've come and really stolen this land from native people, and so we think of anything that's not Christian as being stolen, and there's in a lot of cases a lot of truth to that, but it's not always true. And it doesn't mean that if you're doing something that involves a drum, that it's being taken from some specific culture, right? And that's the case in what we call core shamanism, right? Where Mircea Eliade and others have traveled the world and said, here are the common elements, and in all the indigenous shamanic cultures of the world, here's what they do. And it's not like that we're going to pretend that we are Shipibo or we're some specific culture and we're going to do their practices and claim their heritage. That would clearly be appropriation, inappropriate. But when we take some of these practices, like drumming is so ubiquitous that no culture could claim that as their own, right? And so in that sense, it's our human heritage. And so there is a little bit of like reinventing that has to happen. But even Europeans had these traditions that were smashed and suppressed through kind of Christian domination. It just happened a long time ago, and so we're kind of getting back, I think, to those points, and we're learning, and we should do that humbly and respectfully. But we can do that in a way that is valid and whole, and can really connect with our primordial heritage. And so anyway, that's a little bit about what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it. And I'll just stop there and see if Olivia, do you have anything to add, or Jim, is there anything you want to pipe up and hear from us?
Yeah, I would like to add some more comments about the intersection of naturopathic medicine and this more transpersonal holotropic approach to psychedelic work, and how that is another really big foundational part of the way that we're trying to teach and the way that we practice in our clinic. So one of the foundational principles of naturopathic medicine is the belief in something called the vis medicatrix naturae. And this is the belief that there is a vital force inside of everything that is constantly moving towards wholeness and homeostasis, and that it's really that force that does the healing inside of anything. And then Stan Grof, in his work developing holotropic breathwork and transpersonal psychology, came to use the term inner organic healing intelligence. And I believe that these two concepts are synonymous. It's two different groups of people finding the same central core truth, and giving it a name and trying to work with it. And that's a big thing that we remind our patients of when we're working with them, that it is not the psychedelic medicine that is doing the healing. It's not necessarily any of the herbs that we might prescribe as naturopathic doctors, but these things are all helping to unblock and clear the way for the vital force of our body, or the inorganic healing intelligence, to do its work in moving us back towards health and wholeness and homeostasis. And I would link that back even deeper into time and history, into the origins of shamanism, as being another technology, another way of clearing the path for this vital force to come through into this world. And in those more ancient times, the plants, as well as rhythms, trance states, all of these things came together to help people access this. And I think that's really important to note. And I think that these plants that allow our consciousness to remember and open up to these things again are real gifts, like real gifts to humans on this earth, as we try to manage and navigate moving through life and conscious existence. And I think it's important to note that, especially as I'm watching the chat, and somebody mentioned, like, is using psychedelics a shortcut? Is it bypassing? Yes, it can be. I think that anything can be used to spiritually bypass any hard work. But I also believe that given the right context, the right help, the right support, and intentionality for using these things, they are not shortcuts at all. They are beautiful gifts to help us in this process of remembering and uncovering what it is we're here to do, and living in a more connected, more sustainable way, both to one another as well as to the entire environment that we're situated within.
Thank you, Olivia. Thank you, Matthew. Splendid opening presentation. Thank you so much. I want to start with the question that Veronica put in the chat some time ago that has activated quite a discussion. She was very forthright in saying she would like to try psychedelics, but feels guilty about it. And so I wonder what your comment would be. And I would say before you comment that I think certainly I had that experience, in the 60s when we were trying different hallucinogens and so forth. I remember myself and most of the people around me were terrified, not only that they were going to get caught and put in jail, but also because they were violating all these religious and cultural and social norms. So, Veronica, I would say that overcoming guilt and fear and a variety of other emotions like that is sort of part of the package that all of us, one way or another, went through. So your statement is in some ways a universal statement for most people before they go through the gateway of psychedelics. And I would add almost every other social taboo. That's how society keeps everybody in the box, is by instilling, interior constraints that work within us without the coercive power of the state externally. But Matthew, Olivia, what would be your comments to Veronica?
Yeah, I think a couple of things come forward with that, and one of them, one of the more obvious ones, is just the stigma that has been associated with these, and historically, as you pointed out, Jim, these substances really do cause people to question everything, right? I mean, the nature of reality. Also, the social structures that we've built. What is actually a social contract that we all just accept, and the roles of governments and why we do things the way we do. And so that was part of what was so threatening in the 1960s, when you had people like Timothy Leary's, saying, tune in, drop out, like that whole message, and saying, people don't want to join the kids who take LSD don't want to join your corporations and fight in your wars and do sort of things. It was a real threat to the social structure of that era. And so that was a lot of the reason for the war on drugs. It wasn't so much. There's a great quote by Terence McKenna that I'll just paraphrase rather than look it up. But he said, "It's not, these drugs are illegal not so much because a loving government is concerned about your safety and your health. They're illegal because they cause you to question everything, essentially." And so, the people who were doing LSD in the 60s were almost like immediate, like turn off from the Vietnam War. It was almost immediately like civil rights movement, motivation for these things. And so the more conservative, Saturnian forces said, no, we don't want to relinquish control to, the masses. And so they needed a way to make them illegal. And so they did that, not so much because of the safety concerns, but there was a real effort to make them a smear campaign. And they, were paying scientists to come up with, really wacky research that claimed it harmed your DNA and it caused, birth defects and all these things, and killed this elephant. And the story of, I can't remember the name of the elephant, but they gave this elephant like 3,000 times, the dose of LSD, which probably isn't even the thing that killed the elephant. They were also filling them with tranquilizers, but they claim to look at what the LSD did to these things. So, and then there was in the 90s this interview of Richard Nixon's chief of staff, and again paraphrasing, but he said we knew that it wasn't these drugs were necessarily that harmful, but it was a way that we could go into communities, and by making these things illegal, we could incarcerate, Black civil rights leaders who, happen to use cannabis, or we could go into some of these hippie communes who were opposing the war and incarcerate them for using LSD. And it was a way to just disrupt those movements. So it was very political, it was very racist, and yet we still carry a lot of that stigma. Now they did it, obviously with this long list that we call Schedule I substances, which does include some legitimately harmful things that maybe ought not to be widely used. But it also, imposes this structure that somehow the government should tell you what you should do with your consciousness, which is kind of an absurd idea, really. But we've been kind of convinced of that, and all these, here's your brain on drugs, the famous, anti-drug campaign, and so. And just by the nature of making it illegal, only bad people do illegal things. We catch that stigma. And so there's a lot of work to be undone with that, and what is the legitimate, science of harm and toxicology and those sort of things. And long story short is these things are very safe from a physiological standpoint. Really not much harm there. There are some contraindications with people who experience psychosis or have high blood pressure and those sort of things. They're not risk-free. But they're not as risky as we were being told, particularly in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and so that a little bit of that is being undone in the current movement. But there's also this very natural, like even in a destigmatized world, there's still a natural, I think, hesitation that is in many ways it's a wise sort of fear. That like if I go into this has a potential to really disintegrate my whole worldview, right? And so that is, it's in many ways a healthy fear. It's your ego saying, I don't want to go, I don't want to relinquish control. I'm the one who thinks thoughts. I'm the one who lives my life and decides who I am, and and to dissolve that. Because that's what these things do, is they at least temporarily cause a softening or dissolving of the ego that we then have to, reintegrate or reuse. Obviously, egos are important. We need them to survive. We're not trying to forever destroy our egos. As long as we're incarnated in a body, living in the material world, we need an ego, right? But when we're afraid to go into these experiences, it's our ego that says, I don't want to go. And so there can be in that a healthy respect for the medicine and the power of this medicine that I think is really, really crucial, and is not always respected in, some of the more, I'll just say recreational as a very vague term. But, if you're just sort of going to a rock concert and want to enjoy the music, I'm not judging that. That's totally fine. People have, wonderful, beautiful experiences with that. But you also have, sometimes young kids just wanting to, be blasted into outer space, and they're not necessarily doing the deeper work. There's a larger conversation to be had about that. So just to come back to that really respect for the medicine and the work that can be done. And so being, worried, I still have a bit of anxiety before it's like, it's like, okay, it's time. I'm ready for my next journey, but day of right until, I take it. It's just like, you have to do my own work to process that, because it is scary. And so that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Good. Olivia, what would you say about this matter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Matthew talked about some of the, I would say, physiological and psychological stigma that came out of, the 70s and the war on drugs movement with this. And I would like to just harken back to some of the spiritual stigma that also came out of that same era. There was a huge resurgence or upsurge of especially a more like westernized Buddhism that was happening during that time, like concurrently with this psychedelic movement. And there was a lot of judgment that came out of different parts of that community that to take these entheogens or these psychedelics was to spiritually bypass. And so we were getting stigma from that angle as well. So I think there's a real deeply internalized sense of unworthiness around these substances that have come from many different arenas that, our subconscious have been hearing about for a long time over multiple generations, that we aren't allowed to have direct experience with the divine unless we work really, really hard, do 100,000 prostrations or pray. There's so many things that can come in to be like, in order to be worthy, you must do this first. Or in order to keep yourself safe, you can't, use these things because they could fry your brain or make you go crazy. But again, if we look back into deep time, these medicines were deeply interwoven with the spiritual fabric of any community. There are people that have grown up in the deep past and are still growing up, not seeing these things as separate, not seeing the use of an entheogenic or a psychedelic plant as being in any way bypassing our shortcut. It's just another door that you can walk through to access and remember these things. And I would also agree that there is a wisdom in some hesitation with this. It's no small experience. Many of these traditions that I'm talking about come with paths of initiation into them. And it's good to move slowly and, as your intuition directs as well. But it's important to explore whatever deep sense of shame or internalized unworthiness might also be present in that sort of feeling.
Yeah, good. By the way, there's someone in the chat, Heather Tishman, is trying to contact you to set up an appointment. So you might note that. Let me turn to another topic, and that's the relationship between psychedelics and astrology. As both of you know, I'm sure, when Stan Groff and Rick Tarnas were doing some of the research on LSD, and what they noted that some people would have good trips, some people would have meaningless trips, some people would have bad trips, and they never could figure out what determined whether you went to the left or to the right, up or down, until someone suggested, why don't you look at their natal charts? And once they brought astrology together with the psychedelic experience, they began to be able to determine with extraordinary accuracy the quality of the trip itself. And so I just wanted to bring that up to both broaden the conversation a bit in terms of the illumination of psychedelics, because it not only blows your conventional mind, which is one of the things, as you're pointing out, Matthew, we want to preserve at all costs. Mm-hmm. But it blows us beyond the earth mind as well into the solar system and to the stars, and you begin to realize it's all interconnected. Mm-hmm. It's all one. And that where you are in your astrological journey actually is deeply influential, if not determinative, in relationship to the quality of your psychedelic experience. So I just wonder what your take, both of you, on that has been, and what comments you would make.
Yeah, it's incredible. So in approaching any expanded state journey, we talk about the importance of both set and setting. Set being the mindset that you're in at the point in time, the intention that you're developing behind it, and then the setting, the physical surroundings that you've cultivated for that journey itself. And like you're talking about, Jim, that setting, the more you deepen into our understanding of interconnectivity and the entire realm that we as humans are connected and suspended within, just expands. It can be the room that you're having that journey in, or the place outside, then, that part of the world. And even beyond that, we're held in the setting of all of these celestial bodies and planets that can affect us. And right now, Matthew and I are studying archetypal astrology and its application to psychedelic work with Ren Butler.
They're on tomorrow. Ren and Mari are on tomorrow.
Oh, wonderful. Right.
That's actually how I learned about Ubiquity University, is because, as you summarized, I mean, I've always been kind of interested in astrology, and I've, read some books and whatnot, but it was kind of discovering that Stan Grof was interested in it.
Big time.
And it's okay, maybe there's something a little more to this. And so, I read, Cosmos and Psyche by Tarnas, and for a long time I was okay, I found Ren through, I don't know, independent means, I think. Oh, because he spoke on Psychedelics Today about this exact, connection. And he's, for those who maybe aren't familiar with him, he's, knows Richard Tarnas and has met Groff at Esalen and whatnot. So he's known for a long time, and has been, really a pioneer in archetypal astrology and teaching it, and is also a Groff holotropic breath practitioner. And so I was, I've been waiting for the right time to take his archetypal astrology course, and finally signed up for it this year. And was through being on his newsletter, he says hey, now we have this Groff Studies partnership with Ubiquity University, and I started checking out Ubiquity's stuff, and taking the class with them now in France, and now we're partnered with them. So anyway, that's how we got here. And I don't have a lot to add other than what you've already shared, Jim, other than it's I think really compelling. And I still have a lot to learn about astrology and actually applying it. I've been in a handful of cases doing it at the sort of elementary level at which I understand it all, and even just some of the basics, looking at a few conjunctions or something, if I can find them in someone's chart. It's okay, wow, this really does frame the process that clients are going through in a profound way that can really help guide the therapeutic journey, whether it's for an individual session, or hey, here's the work for the next 6 months to the next 2 years or whatever. This is sort of the theme that we're working with, and it has been really helpful for people who've been open to it.
It's such an extraordinary thing, and I'd love again your comment. The human urge for intoxication, shared by many other species. The chimpanzees, birds, squirrels. There's all kinds of species out there that you will use any opportunity available to them to get either high or intoxicated in some way. And wherever there have been human beings, whether through alcohol or plants or anything that they can put their hands on, there's something about us that wants to escape this ordinary reality.
Mhm.
So it's a real deep part of the evolutionary journey of life that is always seeking to go beyond itself.
Mhm.
And I think that's why life evolves, because there's something inherent in life itself that seeks to break through in some ways, as Jim Morrison put it, to the other side.
Mhm.
So the psychedelic phenomenon is really part of a larger impulse. And I wonder if you could just speak, both of you, to that deep impulse in the psyche, the deep impulse, I would say, in consciousness, that is always looking for increased complexity and possibility.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I remember being a college freshman taking a philosophy course and introduced to the this Greek idea of anamnesis, which is basically when you're born, you forget everything, but prior to that, you're basically what's the word? Not omnipotent, but all-knowing.
Omniscient.
Yeah, omniscient. Thank you. But you forget that when you become incarnated, right? And so that to me was like, like it makes sense really when, and this is what the Socratic dialogue pointed out too, was that like when you learn something, you're actually just remembering it. And I think we can all relate to that experience of encountering some nugget of wisdom or some knowledge, and it feels more like, it doesn't feel new, right? It feels like a remembering. And I think that is really profoundly what makes these type of experiences so profound. It's like we're actually not learning something new necessarily, but we're actually connecting with this vast fabric of the universe, of which we are a part. We're inseparable from it. But yet to be incarnated is to feel separated from it. And that separation is sort of an illusion. That's what the Buddhists would say, right? Is that our individuation is sort of an illusion that we're trying to get clear from. And I think that's what this impulse that you're speaking to be in expanded states is really all about. It's like we're trying to get back to this deep remembering, this deep knowing that really transcends our very small-minded human day-to-day sort of experience. And so I think that's where there's a lot of wisdom to connect with. And it goes back to this, what Groff called the inner healing intelligence, or what we as naturopaths call the V's, this vital force that's what actually does the healing. And that's really what we're here to do, is I would say to heal the collective psyche. And if you're looking for more commentary on that, which I've seen people in the chat mention Chris Beisch, his book LSD and the Mind of the Universe really encapsulates this theme super well. And I agree with him that where our consciousness, our global collective consciousness is evolving, and the work we're here to do is to heal that consciousness, which carries so much trauma. Whether or not you as an individual have experienced trauma, like the human species, not just the human species, but every living thing has experienced trauma. And when people have things like past life regressions, or experience some of the horrific things that Beisch describes in his book, of being a mother in Mongolia who had some marauders were coming and just slaughtering women and children in a village. Like, it wasn't his memory. He didn't even feel like it was a past life of his own. but that it was a trauma that was sort of like it's stuck in the universe, right? But like by going through it and releasing sort of the trauma of that experience, he's actually just slightly, as much as any individual can, doing healing work for the global universal collective. And I think that's what we're here to do. That's my personal belief. And that's, what I'm here to do with my life, and to help turn other people on to that mission as much as possible. It's, it's the bodhisattva path, essentially, is what I would say.
That raises, Olivia, the point you were making, which I think is really important, that the psychedelics don't heal. What they do is they activate and rearrange and open up the possibility of healing for this kind of vital force to do its work, which is blocked because of the constraints that society and the superego and all kinds of forces place upon us. Speak to that a little bit more in light of what Matthew just said about the role of psychedelics in this healing process.
Yeah. Do you mind if I take a moment just to talk a little bit more
Sure.
about what you were talking about with, just what we're doing here in this process of like exploration, healing the universe, before I get to that?
Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like the psychedelic experience or expanded states can really help us open up to better understanding and living within some of the paradoxes of human life and consciousness, or not even human life, but just life in general. And I feel like there's kind of three things within that. So one is this need to heal, another one is to explore, and another one is to escape. And it seems like all living beings move through different phases of those three things. And, you're talking about how animals also, find ways to imbibe substances that, intoxicate them. And, we, all need a break at some point from everything that's going on.
We all need Mardi Gras.
Yeah, all need Mardi Gras. We all need sleep, or a way to escape in some way. And that might be intoxication, it might be sleep, it might be fun or celebration. And that's just a part of this unfolding, or, what I believe and what I've come to know through these entheogenic experiences is that we're a part of the universe unfolding and getting to know itself again. And that's where I come back to this like kind of 3-pillar process as we individuate into these individual consciousnesses in between birth and death, where we get to, I believe, go back into communion with the universe. We're moving through this process of the universe getting to know itself and need breaks from it. We need to go out and explore and see what else is out there, find new frontiers, which can be done through the use of entheogens. And also we can use them to heal. And that's like a universal experience that comes through as well. And yeah, I just want to speak to those other aspects as well that I believe are really important arenas that these medicines give you access to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it's such a powerful thing to realize that, as you were pointing out, Matthew, that, this was an observation that Freud made. His belief that at birth, we forget the universe, he says, and that we spend the rest of our lives trying to remember. And I think that may be one of the reasons why we have this impulse toward intoxication and this impulse toward altering our consciousness, whether through music, poetry, in seemingly mundane ways. But if you think about much of what we do, we spend much of our time trying to alter our perceptions of reality in one way or another in order to gain insight and illumination, or just simply raw experimentation, particularly when we're young. You know, we crave new experiences in and of themselves, which is part of our maturation and our growth. And the fact that the two of you as naturopaths are, exploring how the natural world can aid in our natural healing is a wonderful thing to behold. And so, as we close, would love to have you talk a little bit more about the specifics of your training and how people can sign up. What happens when someone registers? Is it a 6-week course? Is it a 6-month course? What do they get at the end? And talk a little bit about the partnership with Ubiquity.
Sure, I can say a few things to that. But let me just I'll go ahead and just share the screen real quick with I'll just put our website up there. So this is our website, Synaptic Institute. And if you go to Entheogenic Medicine training program, there's a couple options. I mean, our primary program is the Psilocybin Facilitator program, and what that consists of, and we're only doing one cohort per year, and currently we're kind of in the middle of one, so we won't be starting another one until 2024. But it consists of, I want to say like 220 didactic hours and practicum. And so you can read through this. I don't want to bore you with all the details here, but we do have the option to take individual courses. So it's not 100% of the program that you can take individually. Some of them you have to be present for. We do it's sort of hybrid. So we do some of them online. Basically, the online ones you can take individually, but the in-person ones you got to enroll with us for. But you can go to individual courses and take many of them. Some of them are pre-recorded and some of them are live. And so you have to obviously do those before the live sessions happen. And then we also have training retreats. And so those, if you go to our retreats page, the one in Oregon right now is full, but we have 2 coming up right now. One is just a couple weeks away in Mexico. It's not too late to sign up if you want, just a little bit last minute, but we could accommodate anyone if you kind of want to join us in the next week or so. We could get you onboarded. That one's going to be pretty amazing. There'll be opportunities for peyote, ayahuasca, and psilocybin. Don't necessarily recommend everyone do all of them, but there'll be options for those, and it's going to be mostly led by a traditional Mexican healer who's trained in Ulashin is an Ecuadorian tribe of ayahuasca, so it comes from that tradition. And then also Chimicheca as an indigenous group in Mexico, of which he's a part. And so we think it's really important to not only learn about these from a Western perspective, but to gain these other perspectives. And so we're kind of going to them to learn directly from them what they're willing and able to share in their ways, and also pay them in a way that's respectful of what they've given to us. And so it's not too extractive. And then we have Jamaica coming up, and that's in early December, so there's time to sign up for that one certainly. And that's a really wonderful experience. I've been to Jamaica a couple of times to work with First Man, and he started a Rastafari indigenous village, so you get kind of a Rastafarian perspective on psychedelics. And so anyway, more information is to be had on that, but if you're interested in the program, we also have a consultation and journal club group if you're interested in sort of reviewing scientific papers on psychedelic stuff. The journal club is every week, and the consultation group is every month. And those are for anyone who's interested in the space. And Yeah, I'm trying to think what else. The Ubiquity partnership, we also have some information about that. If you're interested in completing our whole program, you can, earn ultimately a master's or a PhD degree from Ubiquity in entheogenic medicine. And so we basically would just complete our program through us and do the extra kind of PhD or master's level dissertation type work through Ubiquity. And it's 240 hours with us. And then some more hours than that with Ubiquity to earn the degree. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. But is there anything big that I missed, Olivia?
Just to add some more specifics, those 240 hours that can be completed over a minimum of 6 months. Sometimes it takes people longer than that, though, to complete all of the requirements for that. And even though we have a cohort going now, you can start completing the pre-recorded material ahead of time, though, and joining for the training retreats and doing the journal club as well. And then for our ketamine assisted psychotherapy training program, that is about 15 hours. So that can be completed much quicker. And that is more geared towards people who already have professional degrees, either medical professional degrees or therapy and counseling degrees.
Amazing. Well, thank you both. This has been a wonderful presentation. I would encourage all of you who are interested in a deeper dive to be in touch with Synaptic Institute and avail yourselves of this extraordinary wisdom. What I like about it is that you're both coming from a naturopathic training perspective, because I think that's an optimal way to perceive the utility of the healing potential of plant medicine, just naturopathically. Yeah. And so I just want to note that and acknowledge that. Any final comments you'd like to make? Matt, do you have anything you'd like to say? Olivia, as we close?
Just to that point specifically, I think that, just as integration is so important after these expanded state experiences, having a naturopathic perspective also holds these states in a real sense of holism that is pretty unique in terms of what a physician can do. Often people come back from these experiences with deep insight into the ways in which the habits they have in their daily life are really preventing them from attaining the states of well-being that they know and now understand are possible for them. And that is where our training as naturopathic doctors comes in to really, really help support people in changing those lifestyle habits.
Great, thank you.
And I'll also just add that we have a really robust faculty. It's not just me and Olivia, training these things. We have, some people of color. We have some queer people to, be really inclusive. We also have a good mix of, licensed healthcare professionals and also people with a lot more lived experience in doing this work than I have. So we have people that have been doing this work underground or in religious organizations to kind of protect the ceremonial part of it. And so anyway, you can go to our faculty page and see who all is included in that. But we try to be inclusive and include many voices in this, and so you're not just getting my take, but multiple. But yeah, I've appreciated the opportunity to chat with you all, and thank you for the conversation, Jim.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Olivia. wonderful to have both of you. We're so pleased at Ubiquity to have you as a strategic academic partner, and we look forward to your students matriculating with us as we both evolve into the future in association and in partnership with the Groff legacy training and what Ren Butler and Mari Castle and others are doing with Stan and Brigitte Groff. So it's good to have you part of the family. So that'll do it for us for today, everyone. You're all welcome to the after session chat group. You'll see the link in the chat box. You also received it in your Zoom reminder. And then we'll see you all again tomorrow for another session of Humanity Rising. Thanks so much. Bye for now.
Thank you, Jim. Bye, everyone.